All right. Hello. How's everyone doing out there? Good. Nice. All right. Well, we are throwing a curveball today. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 8th, 2025 City of Edina Planning Commission meeting. On behalf of the rest of the commission, we are grateful you are here. To those in person and tuning in remotely, your curiosity, participation, and feedback is vital to this process as we navigate change together here in Edina, specifically regarding the ways in which we like to use our land. Say it every time, but the city is committed to receiving and considering your feedback, so we have the best way to do that, www.bettertogetheredina.org. Most land use related items are on there, and there's other interactive features so you can follow along with the change that might be coming to your neighborhood or has already happened or is in the process of happening. Tonight we only have one public hearing, and I will provide some information for how you can participate remotely later once we get to that portion. Until then, just stay tuned. I'll just give a quick rundown of the agenda so you know what to expect. We, as always, have a call to order, then roll call, followed by the approval of tonight's meeting agenda, then the approval of the prior meeting minutes from March 26th. Then we have community comment, which is your chance as a resident who is here in person to testify about any matter not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes to do so. You'll come up to either podium, state your full name, address, and share what you want, and we consider that and try to make some recommendations or change to accommodate. Then next we have the public hearing, which follows a similar process, and I'll get into that later. Then we have chair and member comments, followed by staff comments and adjournment. So without further ado, call the meeting to order, then roll call.
Commissioner Nelson. Here. Commissioner Alkire.
Here.
Commissioner Padilla.
Here.
Commissioner Smith. Here. Commissioner Day. Here. Commissioner Bornstein. Here. Commissioner Felt. Here. Commissioner Henneman. Here. And Chair Bennett.
Here.
Mine's not working either.
I don't know, I think our buttons are all like
They're locked off, and now they're locked
Mine
on.
won't turn off now. I guess I'll be doing a lot of talking.
Hey, David.
No chatting up here.
Oh, it worked. Yep.
Yep.
Oh, no, yours is on. Can you turn it off?
Hello. Hi. Good to see you guys again. All right, so next we have the approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Welcome a motion if
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
all those in favor say aye. Aye. So moved. Next we have the approval of the prior meeting's minutes from March 26th.
Motion to approve the prior meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. So moved. All right, now we have the community comment period. As I mentioned, this is your chance for anyone who's here in person to testify about a matter not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes to do so. Please come up to either podium, state your full name, address. When the light turns green, you got the 3 minutes to go, and then when it turns red, your time's up. Anyone here for community comment? Seeing no one, we will close that part of the agenda and we will move to, or the meeting, and we'll move to the public hearing. So a little bit about what to expect with public hearings. When an applicant, a resident, a developer, or some other entity wants to do something with their land that doesn't quite comply with the code, they put in an application to do so, and staff puts together some facts and findings into a staff report. They consolidate that into a presentation for us and you. We'll continue to expedite that process by just combining that with the next portion, which would allow the applicant to then provide their own presentation about the same thing. Then we'll take it back to the Planning Commission to have questions and answers. Then we'll open it to a public hearing, and that's your chance to participate and testify about this matter, whether you're tuning in remotely or here in person. And you'll have 3 minutes to do so. After that, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission to deliberate, and make our recommendation for approval or denial. And so with that, the item tonight we have is for the rezoning and an ordinance amendment for the conditional use permit for 6600 6868 France Avenue. We have Director Teague. Well, you might just have to.
All of ours work now.
You're
all on.
Maybe this one works.
Can you turn them off?
Test it. I could go from here.
No, I can't turn mine. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to, can
That works, and then we'll just the wireless.
Can you move the slides for me?
Well, then the applicant team, you're just going to have to get creative and cozy over there too.
This is what happens on Tuesdays, huh?
Yeah. We weren't ready for you. All right.
All right, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. This is a site you are familiar with, as we've had a few requests on this property over the last few years. It's located in the Southdale district, if you could. It's the Southdale Office Center site, about 22 acres in size. It's directly west of Southdale. It is guided in our comprehensive plan for office and residential use. Next. And the site is zoned PUD. So there was a PUD zoning district that was established back in 2017. Next. Here is a look at that plan. So there was to be retail along France Avenue, a new tavern on France, a hotel, a medical office building on the north side of the site. The two tall office buildings were to remain. The middle office, two buildings were to be removed. And there was also an 8-story residential development kind of on the south side. None of this development has happened since 2017. The Bank of America was kind of a standalone project that did develop. Next. So just to quickly go through some of those projects, since 2017, there was a proposal before the Planning Commission and Council that was ultimately turned down for housing, office, medical. There were some parking ramps along Valley View. That project was denied. Next. And then most recently, last year, we considered this plan. This one didn't move forward to City Council. The applicant basically withdrew the request. That was for the medical office along France and then a new Tavern on France building. And again, those middle structures were to be removed. This project didn't move forward, which brings us to today. What the applicant is proposing is to remodel those two existing middle office buildings, build a couple of small entryways into that space. They're going to remodel it, as well as remodel the Tavern on France, mainly for handicap accessibility. So the proposal is actually to rescind that PUD. Under the PUD zoning, the only thing they can do is that project. So these little entryways, they couldn't do under the current zoning. So they're looking to reestablish the original zoning district on this site, which was PCD 3. And next, there's another look at the other entrance. Next. So you can see the improvements are in the center of the site. They're going to resurface the parking area. Next slide. So what their request before the Planning Commission is to rescind that section of the zoning ordinance, the PUD, and reestablish the PCD 3 zoning district, which dates back to the 60s. They're also requesting a conditional use permit for the office buildings. Offices are a conditionally permitted use, so they'd like to make that a lawful existing use. There's no changes to the existing offices. Next. So looking at our pyramid of discretion, while this is a rezoning, it's, while the city does have some discretion, we have to allow some use on the site. So reestablishing the existing zoning, it seems a reasonable approach to allow something to happen if they have a grand plan in the future. Similar to the PUDs that have been requested here, you know, it would be a completely different application, a new PUD type request. Next. And next. So here's just a little highlight of a little closer view of just the resurfaced parking. In terms of parking standards, they're well overparked for comparing the entire 22-acre site to code. There's a little plaza there on the south side to the left of the screen that they would also be constructing. Next. In terms of the comprehensive plan, again, the site's guided for office and residential. Primary uses include office, limited retail, and housing. So this would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. Next. Looking at our rezoning criteria, we believe that the project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, wouldn't be detrimental to surrounding properties. Again, this is all existing. Wouldn't result in an overly intensive land use. When you look at the floor area ratio, which is the allowed square footage on the site, there's actually a reduction under the PUD. They're allowed 1.0 FAR. With the PCD3 zoning, it would be a reduction to 0.75. So there would be no traffic changes. The little small entryway additions meet city code, so there's no setback variations. This doesn't, if the site were zoned PCD3 today, this wouldn't even trigger a review by the Planning Commission. It's less than 10% of the total areas of the building. Next. So looking at the conditional use permit criteria, we also believe that that is met. Again, wouldn't have an adverse impact on governmental facilities, utilities, the traffic. Again, it's an existing use, and the allowed density on the site is actually decreased. So we believe that the conditional use permit criteria here is met. And next. So primary issue is it reasonable to rezone the site to PCD3? Again, we believe it is. It reestablishes the existing zoning on the site. It's consistent with the PCD3 zoning district to the east, Southdale. Most of the properties to the south also have a PCD3 zoning designation. And next. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan. And again, they've tried to redevelop this site per that PUD since 2017, but just haven't been able to do so. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the conditional use permit and the rezoning of the site. And the applicants are here to introduce themselves and potentially make a presentation or answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Carrie. We'll bring it to the applicant, but maybe just quickly before that, Carrie, if you could just kind of explain the history of the use of PUD in the city and kind of why, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but I think it'd just be good for someone tuning in of like why this is happening again.
Sure. The city, we created the PUD option, it was about maybe 12, 15 years ago as a tool to implement the Southdale Design Experience guidelines and really get the type of development that the city wants to see. The PUD was going to be the tool to negotiate those types of larger scale developments to, again, get the type of development that the city wants to see. This is the only PUD that we've done. I think we're in the 25 range since that time. We haven't had any that have failed to move forward. This is the first one where they're asking to rescind and go back to the original zoning on the site.
You kind of touched on why it's unique, because you only can do anything, the only thing you can do is what conforms to that PUD, so.
Yeah, it's kind of the good and bad about a PUD. That becomes the zoning on the site, and that's the only development that can move forward, so there's not much flexibility.
Yeah.
You know, it affords the city some protection to make sure that we're going to get the type of the development that's promised. But then again, there's no flexibility if it doesn't work.
So we're not basically voting on approving that. Can anyone hear me?
You might have to come over and use mine.
Well, maybe we'll just, is yours working or no?
Mine's working.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, we're not approving those little additions. We're just basically making it a viable option for them to do after we make
Correct.
this rezoning and
Yep.
conditional use
Correct.
permit. Okay, great. And with that, I guess we welcome the applicant to provide a presentation. Musical mics here.
Good evening, Chairman Beckett and Planning Commission members. My name is Della Polpine. I work for Olympus Ventures and a part of the Southdale Office Partners. I also have Sean Smith of Southdale Office Partners, and Eric Walgren is here as well tonight to answer any questions. A lot of our presentation that we had put together was on the new additions, and I think Carrie did show a lot of that within his, so unless you want more details to that, we're here to just answer any questions, but I'm happy to show the presentation as well, but I think his did cover quite a bit of it.
I'm a fan of brevity, if everyone else is too. Questions for, it goes out. Questions for either Carrie or the applicant team?
This question is more for Director Teague. I know this is kind of unique, right? We haven't had PUDs go back to the original zoning. I'm just curious about, from a process perspective, if we do reverse this back to PCD3, the developer gets to make the additions to the office as they're intending. If this site, again, were to apply for a new PUD, would that be a PUD 26 essentially, or would the PUD 11 just be something that you just strike out of the current zoning?
Yeah, so there would be so we're basically deleting this section of the code, so it would still be available to plug a PUD into that number unless another one comes along and we plug it in first. So to say exactly where it would line up in the PUD list, it could either be in the location that it is now or at the end of the list. Gotcha.
And just one other question. So I know that there could be other options, right? So PCD 3 is one, PCD 2 and 1 are options, POD 1, POD 2 are options. Just walk us through, like, how do we, yes, it's, the PCD 3 was part of the zoning initially, but could the applicant pick from a different set of zoning that might have applied? Like, what process do you go through to identify which one was most applicable to the needs?
Okay, that's working. The biggest difference between the two is that if it were rezoned to the planned office district, the restaurant would then become a non-conforming use. A restaurant's not allowed in the POD zoning district. So with the PCD3 designation, they wanted all the uses to be legally allowed and not creating a non-conforming use.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Quick follow-up to that. I think if you could just clarify, and this is for Director Teague. So the comp plan has it designated as office residential. So but PCD3, can they still build homes? I'm concerned about future use for possible housing.
Yes, housing would still be allowed. It would be a conditionally permitted use, so that would be a possibility for the site.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just clarify what's the disadvantage to having it be
zoned POD? Because it was POD immediately before the PUD, right?
Correct.
So what's the disadvantage to going back to POD and having Tavern on France be a non-conforming use?
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's basically a legally existing non-conforming use. They
Right.
couldn't expand it or do anything like that. As an allowed use, they could.
Okay, a couple of things. One, first is an observation more than anything. You know, when this project came before us back 2 years ago, I think it was, last year, it seems like 2 years ago. Time flies. A lot of the resident feedback and concern was around the oak trees that are around the property. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that if we rezone this back to PCD3, right, there is no protection for those trees anymore. Like, the resident can really do what they want because we don't have a tree ordinance for anything that's not outside of R1 and R2.
That's correct.
Okay, so this segues into a question of, the city even started discussing that in terms of a tree ordinance for other zoning types beyond
Yes.
R1 and R2?
Yes, yeah, it is something that we're planning on bringing forward. They've been working with I think it's the EEC.
Okay.
The city council's been looking at doing some changes to the tree preservation ordinance, and part of that is going to be a look at the commercial regulations, kind of matching the two.
Okay. Yeah, because I just remember that being such a big, intense topic of conversation when that original project came in front of us. So I know a lot of people are still concerned about those trees. So then, I guess segueing on to the neighborhood, I really didn't see much feedback on Better Together. I've heard much about this anyway. Have you guys heard much from the community in terms of feedback or anything like that?
Yeah, thanks. Sean Smith here. We've hosted numerous neighborhood meetings in the past, and you're absolutely right. The trees have been a big concern on that site, and the Cornelia Association president's here as well, and we've certainly adjusted our plans to accommodate those trees in the past, for sure. In terms of additional neighborhood feedback, I think, we've always heard that more amenities for our site as a transition zone, because crossing France Avenue is a big deal. So I think allowing for other retail uses and coffee cafes and anything that we can do to enhance that, to bring it closer to the neighborhood, I think that's exactly what we would want to do as well, and to try to accommodate some of the neighborhood uses as well. So,
Okay, thanks.
For this particular rezoning, we have not heard from the neighborhood groups at all. I think they're fine with it, but we haven't heard anything.
Right, yeah, just thought I'd ask, yeah, thanks.
I just had two questions for Director Teague. So you said there were like plans for this site. It came up twice in the past. One was a year and a half or whatever it was, the one we were just talking about. And then one was before then. What year was that?
That was 2021.
Oh, okay. And do you remember essentially what the ask was at each of those last two?
Yes.
Was it a rezoning?
It was. The
Into what?
2021 request was for a whole new PUD. So
Okay.
it was going to completely change that 2017 plan.
Yep.
And the one last year was a request to PCD 3. So those were the two.
Was it anything else other than that?
Just those two.
Okay.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, there were some variances involved also.
Okay. And the reason that the PCD3 rezoning wasn't granted, or why this body didn't feel like that was warranted last time were there
Yeah.
several reasons that were primary, or was there like one or two reasons? If you remember. I mean, I know I was part of the conversation, but some of the people here weren't, and I just wanted to kind of remember.
Yeah, part of those, the oak trees that you had mentioned, some of those were to be removed, maybe, I don't remember the exact number, maybe half of them. There were some concerns about the connection through the site. Those are the two that really stick out to me.
Okay. Like, in other words,
So
like
there's
the
concerns with the site plan.
plans,
yeah.
yeah, the site plan itself seemed inconsistent with maybe some of the guidelines that govern that district.
Yeah, and it didn't move forward to the city council, so there was no action that was actually taken.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I guess just to piggyback on that, going back to what it was or a version of what it could have been, like POD3 or PCD3. I mean, components of previous proposed plans could happen, and kind of what the applicant was saying. It's like we're just allowing there to be more flexibility with a typical zoning standard that is normally applied to these sites, and kind of that's the hindrance of a PUD is like you have to do that and you're stuck with doing that, and if you want to deviate even a little bit, it would be easier to do what's happening right now is just go back to what it was or what it could have been, and now you have a typical zoning standard that you can redevelop within the confines of that, and if there's further deviations, then we would see a proposal for variance, et cetera. Correct? Okay.
Right, yeah, the PCD3 district does give them a little more flexibility in terms of uses with the retail type uses that were mentioned.
And yeah, going back to kind of the accepted 2017 PUD, that was, a lot of why it was accepted was the site plan and the variety of uses. So getting back to something that allows versions of that, I think makes sense. Is there anything nuance that we're missing with any of this, or is it as straightforward as it feels?
I think it's relatively straightforward, yes.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant or, yeah, Commissioner Ottoman?
Oh, maybe I'm. Okay, I'm back, I think. I remember this project very well because I think it was my first, if not or second, Planning Commission meeting. And what I remember is we're talking a lot about rezoning in connection with the Greater Southdale District Design Guidelines. And I guess if we leave things exactly how they are, the applicant, unfortunately, even with minor renovations, has to come to us for approval. But if we grant them PCD 3, if we are essentially giving a property owner a new zoning, that they can develop additional retail and additional conforming uses without coming back to this body, right?
Well, if it's a freestanding new use, like a medical office or a retail building, another restaurant, freestanding, that would require a site plan review, and that would come before the Planning Commission, because it would trigger the need for an analysis of parking and those types of things. The little entryways don't generate the need for additional parking.
So that's the trigger. So there is a universe where whether it's underground or whatever, they build a deck with adequate parking and an office tower on one of the vacant lots right now, and they don't need to come?
That would have to come back.
It would still come
Yep.
back.
A new large building like that would.
But with less discretion, right? Because you're at the top, right?
Yeah.
Site plan.
So I guess it would help me. I'm thinking about it as just a straight request for rezoning. And I guess it would help me understand why this applicant gets I don't know what the right word is, but the opportunity to change their zoning, even though it may do things that they're developed inconsistently with the rest of the Greater Southdale District guidelines. And so I guess I'm trying to understand, if we grant this rezoning, what kinds of things can the applicant do besides making it ADA accessible, right? Like, what kinds of things could they do without coming before us then?
Under the existing PUD, or they can't do anything
No, if we went
except
to
for that.
PCD 3, what sorts of things could they do by right then in PCD 3?
Well, that's a tough one. There's a myriad of potential. If it's a small addition to an existing building that meets setback and doesn't generate the need for more parking, that wouldn't come before the commission. But if it's a, larger scale, like I mentioned, a completely new building, that would have to come back before the planning commission for site plan review. But if it meets all of the PCD 3 standards, we don't have a lot of flexibility to say yes or no. But under the current PUD, they can't do anything.
Right.
That even these little small additions to the building, which was some frustration for the property owners, but they can't remodel those 2 existing buildings to make it ADA compliant without having to go back to either POD or PCD 3 or PCD.
And that hasn't changed from the last time they came, or the previous 2 times they came before us, right? That anything they did with the PUD would require an approval.
Right.
So I guess I'm trying, I appreciate that you want to add handicap access to that 3rd building, so I don't want to be obstructionist, but I guess I'm failing to see why this time the reversion to PCD 3 makes sense when it didn't 2 times prior.
Well, it was more about the site plan.
Okay.
Yeah, the times prior had specific alterations to the site beyond just going back to the rezoning. So it's like it had variance requests, other things that were too big of asks, essentially. Since this is the first time that we would have one go back, I mean, has there been consideration like a building permit, if not used in a certain amount of time, there would be like a reversion process that could be instituted? Like if a PUD isn't actually built out, like 5 years, it reverts back or something. I'm just trying to think of how can we accommodate less frustration, because just going back to this just seems very straightforward to allow anything to happen. I don't know if there's other cities, maybe something your team could look at. We tend to have like deadlines of certain things when it comes to construction.
Sunset clause.
Yeah.
Like the site plans have expired for the PUD 17, so if they wanted to do anything within that PUD, they'd still have to come back for site plan approval, because those have all expired.
Just something to think about. I mean, I know we're trying to get away from using it, but this actually seemed like a project that was a good candidate for a PUD because it was so large scale. But just in general, something to think about, maybe add to our list when we're going through the zoning review.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Any other questions? Do you have any other? Okay. Nothing? Thank you, guys. So this is a public hearing, so I'll provide some information for those who might be tuning in remotely, just really excited to participate. We're excited you are too. So hopefully you have your phone out and you can call the following number, and this should pop up on the screen too. Call 312-535-8110. Then enter access code 2862-926-3795. The password is 5454. Then press *3 on your keypad when you'd like to get in the queue to speak, which is now. We'll let the leg of this catch up, give a minute to do so. And while we do that, we'll open it to those who are here in person who'd like to testify. Please state your full name, address. You got 3 minutes to do so. And when the light's red, we'll ask you to wrap it up. Thank you.
Is this one working?
Yes,
Okay, good.
something works.
My name is Nora Davis, and I live at 6921 Southdale Road in the Lake Cornelia neighborhood. And I'm here this evening. We've been through this a number of times. But I wanted to say, Edina has been excited about reusing and remodeling, and here we have a chance to actually do that. They are not going to tear down those buildings and create a lot of waste that Lord knows where to go. They're not going to have to source metal and steel and wood from, again, who knows where. They're going to reuse what they have, so they get a lot of points for that. I'm also want to make a comment about the Southdale Design Guidelines. I attended a lot of those meetings, and that plan was approved in 2018. But then the pandemic hit, and the world changed. And all of a sudden, all the things that we talked about don't really apply anymore. So I think we need to start looking at that plan and thinking, hey, maybe we can do better, because so much has changed since 2018. So think about that. One of the concerns that's going to come up in the Cornelia neighborhood are the trees. So again, we have to be very concerned about those trees and how the exit and entrances along Valley View Road. But other than that, I think the fact that they're reusing a building and remodeling what's there is great for our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here in person that would like to testify? That's not a part of the applicant team. I don't see anyone, so we'll move to the people who might be in the queue to speak virtually.
There is no one in the queue to speak.
Since it's been already a minute, I think we're safe to proceed with closing the public hearing. Welcome a motion to do so.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. So moved. Public hearing's closed. Thank you again for your testimony. Bring it back to the Planning Commission to deliberate. I think one thing that I'd just like to stipulate here is, again, what we are voting on is basically just a rezoning and a conditional use permit. So it's not the specifics of any remodel or anything. It just will allow for those things to happen. Currently under the PUD, none of those things, nothing can happen. That's as simple as it is, unless anyone else has any other comments.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, when I read this initially, I thought this would be pretty easy, but I really appreciate the questions that, that came up. Commissioner Hanneman, your question, Commissioner Day, your question, and I was thinking about this, and even, the resident Nora Davis, giving her feedback, and I think it makes sense, right? We certainly want to allow the developer to make adjustments, renovations to the site, and that is very commendable. At the same time, I think where Commissioner Hanneman was going was, what are we giving up if we switch it from a PUD to PCD3, right? We have less discretion, less control, less influence over what's going to happen over that site compared to what we have today, right? PUD 11, we know what we want there, right? It's a major thoroughfare on France. We had all these ideas and it's kind of locked in, but it prevents the developer from making any kind of minor changes, right? So that's kind of the rub. So it's almost like a question between trust. Like if we could say, sure, let's make this a PCD3, and we trust that you're going to develop this site in a way that's beneficial to the community. You're not going to take down the trees. You're going to build everything nice, but we don't get to see it, right? It's kind of a trust question. And so I guess, yes, it's an easy decision to say, yes, it's this small renovation, but what else could they do without our influence? And are we willing to just say, go right ahead, make all the changes that you want to make, and we trust that you're going to make the adjustments, not just for this renovation, for ADA compliance, but other things in a way that the community would appreciate. Like, not taking down the trees or other types of changes within the scope of PCD3. So I guess the question for us, I think, is not just a simple, sure, you could make these adjustments, but what else are we going to be giving up if we do pass this back to a PCD3 type of zoning?
Love to hear other people's thoughts. One thing that comes to mind too is, I mean, what's on the table is they're not a developer, right? I mean, in this context, right? They're a property owner. I mean, if you took this to your residence and you wanted to do something on your land and it just doesn't make sense anymore, but you're locked into that and the times change, it just feels like the city, and we're open to legal scrutiny too, especially if you were preventing like ADA compliance. Just like, it seems like an obvious thing that is a risk with the PUD process if it doesn't develop forward. So I mean, with none of them that haven't gone forward, I don't think we've had to consider some of these things, but the questions you're saying, it's like you have to think of the alternative too. It's like preventing a property owner from using their property in any other way, especially one to comply with other like federal like requirements. It seems like we're opening ourselves up to, I guess I just would err on the side of the property owner's rights. Yeah.
But we're not reverting back to the previous zoning. We're reverting back to a different zoning category. And honestly, that's where I'm struggling. Commissioner Smith said what I was trying to get at much more eloquently. But it's not simply we had a plan and whatever that is, 8 years ago, and times have changed and that plan doesn't work. So can we go back as the property owner to what we were, which was office with a conforming use for the restaurant? And so to me, that's the struggle to me, is I don't know what we're giving up, but in light of there not being a compelling reason, I guess, for PCD3, it feels like granting a rezoning to a property owner, regardless of whether it kind of goes with the comprehensive plan. And I'm trying to hold myself accountable. Sure. Because March of last year, 6 of the 9 of us voted against this change. And so that's what I'm wrestling with. I don't want to make their property unusable, but they're asking for something different than what it was before.
I see what you're saying. I guess the context of the site, how long was it POD? 50 years or so?
I believe it was in the 80s. Yeah, since 84.
So I guess to respond to the times and the market conditions, like a lot of things become obsolete with our current zoning. So like if we have a chance to get the site back to something that's more fitting of what it is, I mean, to me, and that's the discretion, like to me, PCD3 makes more sense than POD, to have a non-conforming use on it, that versus to allow something with a conditional use and provide more uses that are consistent with the Southdale experience guidelines and the plan, which is now approved, which predates the 2017 PUD predated. So now it's like we have to me, a much more crystal clear vision for Southdale that PCD3 is more aligned with than POD3. That's just how I see it. And there's no site plan attached to this. So what we voted against was specifics with the rezoning that weren't consistent with the plan.
That makes sense.
So
Yep.
this is just
That
like
makes sense.
clean slate to allow you to do something that to me is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the Southdale plan. To Commissioner Padilla's point, with a conditional use permit, you can do housing. So it seems to match the office residential component of the comp plan.
Can we just,
Yeah.
No, you're going to ask the same question I am.
just a clarification, by rescinding the PUD 11, we're going back to PCD 3, which is what it was before. It was POD? I have in my notes
It was originally established as PCD 3 when Southdale and the whole area was developed. When the city rewrote its zoning ordinance in 1984, That's when it was.
Went to POD.
Then it went
So
to
it went from
POD.
PCD3 to POD to PUD, and now they're wanting to go, skip the POD back, not simply go back to what it was before PUD 11, but go to PCD3. Oh, got it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sorry. It said that the city intentionally rezoned to POD to quote-unquote protect the office space, right? That's why I went from PCD 3 to POD, is that they deliberately wanted office space there in that part of Southdale.
The existing office space that was there, correct.
Okay.
Yep, and it knew that it was creating a non-conforming use with the restaurant.
I just, in the middle of all the deliberations, I wanted to take a moment to thank you, because for the past 7 years, you've been spending a lot of money on architects and engineers, and I appreciate that. And that doesn't even, say anything about the internal dialogues you've been having about all of this work. So there's been a lot of thought that's been put into this project, and completely understand you're wanting to be able to now at least fix this up and get it accessible. So I really appreciate that, and very empathetic with your being property owners and wanting to do something with your property.
I'd echo that. Thanks for coming in tonight and for all your work on the site. Really interesting discussion tonight. I think what it comes down to for me is that if the ask was to go to POD, I think I would want to deny it. PCD 3 makes a lot of sense to me because it has the best fit to the comprehensive plan, which POD wouldn't. So, and that's where we tend to really get in trouble, is when we have zoning and a comprehensive plan, as we have experienced, that don't match. And unless somebody can come up with a better match to the comprehensive plan than PCD 3, I think that's, in my opinion, that's the best approach for us. The PUD is not going to get built, so we're going to have to replace it with something. And PCD 3 feels right to me, but certainly open to other. If there is a better one, let's use the better one, but I can't see what that would be.
In your comments, in addition to the conditional use permit?
Yes.
As well, right? Okay.
Well, it's a conditional use permit for its existing use, so it doesn't feel that controversial.
But it would allow future office uses?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Consistent with a comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Got it. I think this is a great conversation. I think I love the evolution, right? The evolution from PCD, POD, PUD, now going back to PCD3. I get that. And I appreciate how PCD3 aligns with the comp plan. I also just wanted to, just test the boundaries of what we could do, right? I would think that every time the zoning has changed, a lot of deliberation occurred that stated that this new zoning was better than the old one for these reasons, right? And we kept doing that, right? So it went from PCD 3 and then discussion at the time, POD worked better. PUD 11 worked even better than that, right? Because we're adding more thought, context, we're factoring a lot of different things, right? And now we're going back to PCD 3 because of the comp plan. But doing that kind of ignores the evolution of all the thinking that went into getting us to this stage. So I guess me trying to poke around to the edges here, I think Director T, you mentioned that in order to make any kind of change, it was not permitted if it stayed as PUD 11. Is it possible that we could decide as a body here to grant the small change but keep the zoning as it is? Is that something that's within our space to do?
It is not. The additions are being attached to a building that was supposed to be removed in that PUD. So these two middle office buildings are supposed to be removed, along with the Tavern on France.
Okay. Just testing out the boundaries, right? But the takeaway too is that, you know, every decision that we've made to get to this stage of, I would think, was really well thought out. Again, you know, if we're going back to allow this to happen, I totally get it and it makes sense. I just want us to also not just look at it as just this minor change, but look at the evolution of what occurred on the site.
I guess one crystal clear takeaway is, for anyone tuning in, is a PUD is extremely strict, right? I mean, it isn't like this zoning category where now you can do these things. It's you have to do these exact things. So those exact things seem to be compliant with PCD 3 with a conditional use permit for office, correct?
The uses.
So there might be some variances with where things are placed, but the uses are consistent with that previous PUD. So it seems to get us back to kind of like the fruit of what was in it, but maybe not the details. So that's the takeaway and the danger of PUD, is it's just, you have to do that. Or the benefit of it, you have to do that. Which, again, maybe prevented a couple less desirable applications previously. Commissioner Day.
I was say, if anybody wants to take a look. Oh, I see that now. Okay. All right. Say, if anybody ever wants to take a look at how restrictive the PUD development code is, go to Chapter 36, Article 8, Division 4, Section 36-504, and you would see we describe in very, very explicit detail what the PUD zoning for this site is and why this is such a big ask, why we can't really make any changes once we've codified this into the city code, right? So, I mean, when we use PUD, right, we kind of box ourselves in, we box the developer in, and if the market changes and, right, really things go awry, then we run into scenarios like this, right? So there's definitely benefits of using PUD. I think we're seeing one of the potential downfalls of a reliance on PUD here. And I think it makes sense then to rezone to PCD3 is a very reasonable request.
Okay, so just very quickly, it's my understanding, what I'm hearing is that our hands are completely tied under the PUD, so there's nothing that can be done. So some kind of a change needs to be made here. And it seems to me that the PCD3 grants us the most flexibility and is aligned with at least one of our guiding documents. So I'm fully supportive.
I'd like to make a motion in that regard now that we've reached this point, I think we've reached the point for that. So I motion to recommend the City Council approve the request for rezoning from PUD 11, Plan Unit Development 11, to PCD 3, the Planned Commercial District, ordinance amendment and conditional use permit to allow office uses on the site.
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
Again, just pushing the boundaries, right? Trying to get to think through it. Just a question for us, right? Like, how much of a change, if the applicant wanted just to make a tiny change, you just wanted to change a door, right? Does that also warrant switching back to PCD 3? I guess the question is, like, how much of a change would warrant us to go back to a previous zoning? Just a thought, right? A big change or a small change, right? And what does that really mean?
If we kept the PUD in place? Is that what you're saying? What would trigger?
Well, yes. What would trigger, in our minds, the size of a change that would cause us to go from PUD back to a different zoning?
Well, my thought is that if they were going to do a change a door on one of these buildings that were going to be gone, they couldn't do that because they wouldn't need a permit to change a door. However, if they're going to do anything that requires a permit on those buildings that weren't going to be there, then they couldn't do it. Just, that's my observation.
Yeah, I think what they ran into is they'd like to remodel the existing building. They have handicap accessibility issues, so just to get an interior remodel permit is a challenge because they have to put in these entryways that provides that handicap accessibility. And that's what, because of the expansion, that's what triggers then the need for the rezoning.
So basically, any small modification requiring a building permit could do it, or it could be prevented from getting that building permit. Again. So we have a motion and a second. We'll go for a vote. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Good luck on your future projects. Hope to see you guys back. All right, that was it for our planning, for the planning commission meeting. Oh, man. For our public hearings. And we have no reports and recommendations. So we go right to chair and member comments. Are there any comments from fellow commissioners?
I'll add one thing. It's in, let's see. Hey, right. Friday the 25th is the city's Arbor Day celebration at Braemar Golf Course. You can volunteer between 10 and 2 to help plant trees. I'll be there.
You're cut off.
I'll be there if anybody else wants to come help plant trees at Arbor Day. Sign up online.
Carrie, I just have one question since we've had all these conversations about PUD. Commissioner Padilla mentioned last meeting there's conversation with the city about doing on the 70th site, maybe helping with the parking deck. Because we're asking all of these questions about a PUD and we have one that isn't working, is the city also bound then by the PUD parameters?
Oh, there it goes. Yes, the same restrictions that applied for this site would apply for that 70th and France site. If they do any deviation from what was approved, they would likely have to come back before the Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay, just curious. I mean, as we think about this, that's not the only, I mean, that's the hard thing with these developments, right? They take years and years to put together. So if you've gone ahead and proactively zoned, or you have a PUD because you're basically at closing, and then the world moves out from under you as it's wont to do, and you've got, 4 or 5 different owners trying to get them all to agree to all the different pieces. Inherently, the ball is going to move, and how do we think about that, those subsequent revisions that may or may not be needed or wanted based on the economy and the parties at the time? I hope it doesn't revert back to their needing a rezoning, because now we have a pit, but I don't know, I was just thinking about that.
Good question. And considering, I know maybe over the last 5 years, there's been growing concern over PUD usage and overusage, especially from like residents about like very specific small spot PUDs. I think some of that just goes to what you're saying, like we need to just be a little more careful with how we employ them and understand the risks and rewards of doing so. Because it seems like it'd be just more in our favor and someone else's if we have a good enough zoning designation that they conform to that provides the flexibility we want to see. That's probably what we should keep encouraging people to do, like we saw with the most recent Opus development in Grandview. Was a previous one a PUD, and so then they came back with a PCD, or what was theirs? Just the
PCD 2.
PCD 2. So like I think the message is getting out there, and we're getting better requests and applications as a result.
I was thinking specifically, just in my mind, like the Macy's site, right? You have 2 separate towers. That's likely going to be 2 different parties, 2 different financing packages, twice as many opportunities for it to fall apart. If having a smaller area zoned gets the give to get that we want to create in these special areas, some public amenities or benefit, but prevents throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because it's just a piece. And then if the second piece doesn't come together, you have a little bit more wiggle room there.
I think one difference between the site that we looked at here tonight was that they didn't replat. It's essentially one lot. With 70th and France and with Macy's, they platted it into the 4 parcels for each lot. So if they come back for a revised site plan, at least we've got the parcels divided.
I think one important thing to ask ourselves as we move into this rezoning initiative, right, and we talk about changes to the code which are coming up, right, this would be on the top of our mind with this discussion, is the balance between how much control do we want to leverage over these developments, right? And once you kind of touched on it tonight, we were saying, what are we giving up? How much control are we giving up? And how much we can dictate what lands on this site in terms of sustainability, affordable housing, et cetera. Do we want to give up that element of control with PUD, which is often why we rely on it and use it? Or do we want to make it easier for people to respond to market conditions and to changes? And make it easier for people to build by right. I think that's a very, very important tug of war that it has to exists, right? And that it will be a big subject of conversation as we talk about changes to the code here. So something to think about as we move forward.
Good job tying it in. One of the comments I just wanted to share was I mentioned toward the end of the last meeting that there's an RFP out for the Grandview Public Works site. And it's due, I think responses are due by the 15th, so like a week from now. Is it the 15th? It's sometime next week.
I believe that's
maybe
right.
9, I don't know. But I want to kind of keep the conversation going with some of that. I feel like there's items like that, maybe from the HRA or whatever, that are brewing that we aren't necessarily aware of, and it might be helpful to be a little more aware of it ahead of time, to just at least be prepared to talk to residents who then find out and ask you about what's going on. But in that particular one, the main reason I'm bringing this up is kind of like the last proposal we saw for the public works site, in my opinion, kind of deviated the most from the Grandview development framework. And this request kind of matches it again. And you'll hear my sentiment if, say, the wrong developer gets picked, in my opinion, and we see something very similar to the last one. I guess my message is really to the city council, to select a development partner that is willing to do something bold. The entire framework was predicated on that redevelopment of that site, and it being like the singular unique opportunity to transform the district and have a central gathering place. And I think a lot of what's happened over the time is the city's like relinquished control a little bit more and more. So the request here is like, give it completely to developer, sell the entire piece of property, and let them do what they want in a compelling way that meets those goals. But I think what's lacking in those goals is kind of that central gathering place that really got people excited about the Grandview development framework. So I guess my message is, if we give that to the developer, there needs to be a lot of focus on what type of gathering place they're creating, because part of the proposal the request for proposal I read is it could be multi-use or residential. So what we could see is a developer that just wants to do all residential there. And I think that's just getting it out there, like that defies the development framework. Central area, very prominent. So can the city really expect to get the highest value on its land if they want to use it for, a lower residential density or ownership? So there's like competing things that are in that RFP, and I'm sure there's other things that we see, but my message to the council is like, come on, be bold and stick back to kind of that framework about there being the central gathering space. So what I'd like to see is a developer that can bring a multi-use to the site in a way that allows some sort of commercial use to have people there to linger and stay. And I'll probably say that at the next meeting too. Part of the RFP, there's like 3 steps. They'll kind of narrow down who responds and conforms a little bit to the request, and then there'll be a public meeting on that. Then they'll have a final public meeting as they narrow it down and select a partner. But just kind of wanted to give you guys a little glimpse into what that RFP is. If you're interested about the process, it's really like right upon us as the developers are out there potentially expressing interest. And by next week, that's the deadline. So, all right, that's my soapbox I'll climb off of now. Any other comments? Yeah.
Yeah, just to, again, we're just kind of commenting right now and just sharing ideas, and I appreciate all the ideas, I think, this is like the first time we had to kind of go back on this PUD. The way how I think about PUDs is that it's like the top of the hill, right? Like, we grant this, it's like my kids, right? Like, if they say, I want all this cake, okay? And I give them the cake, and they took 2 bites and they say that they're full and they don't want anymore. I'm like really mad, because you asked for it, right? So to me, it's like, if we grant these PUDs and developers are like, yes, we're not gonna do this PCD3, we're gonna do a PUD, and we're committed and we're locked in, then you're locked in. To come back later and say, hey, I can't eat this cake anymore, I need a smaller piece, it's kind of going backwards, right? Now, there could be some strategies, right? Like, as Director T was mentioning, you could replat in such a way that strategically you might be able to break it up so you could make small changes if you needed to without having to do the whole thing, right? This is a big site. So I guess where I'm going, as we think about this new, coding update and everything like that, how do we think about PUDs? Is this something that you can just hop into and hop out of, or is this something you want to lock into and you drive that forward, right? That's just kind of the thought that I have.
Thank you, everyone, for the comments. Carrie, do you got any?
I do. Just a couple quick updates from City Council. Last week, the council held the public hearing for the Southdale Library site. They'll make a decision on that next week. And also next Wednesday, they will consider the small area plan for the Lincoln and Londonderry. So that's it.
Wonderful. Well, I guess there's one thing left. If people's buttons work.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. So moved. The meeting has been adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
It's like a 2-second lag, maybe, or something.
You win.
This, for one,
$1 or something.
Good guess on that timing. My mic won't go on. I know it's delayed, but I would look down and mine was always on.
Concern themselves with our business, right?
can I go watch the White Lotus final tonight?
Oh,
Have you been watching
watched it last night.
Oh, so don't tell me.
No, I hurried up to watch the last couple episodes because I didn't want any spoilers. It was I didn't want to see anything accidentally.
Sorry.
I'll be anxious to hear what you think about it. Have you enjoyed it so far?
I have.